Hello everyone, Dr. Polaris here. Isn't it interesting how different cultures can have such wildly varying attitudes towards the same type of animal? A good example would be snakes. Whereas in Christian Europe, the legless reptiles were viewed as symbols of sin and evil, while in India snakes are regarded far more positively, being associated with healing, rebirth, fertility and protection. Another instance encompasses the subject of today's episode, the so-called true rats of the clade Rattini. In broader Anglophone contexts at least, these rodents are generally viewed very negatively, being seen as vermin associated with sewers, filth and disease. They are also regarded as thieving, duplicitous and violent, with the term rat being widely used as an insult, and pop culture often casts the rodents in the role of villains and monsters, such as in H.P. Lovecraft's short story The Rats in the Walls, the rodents of unusual size from The Princess Bride, and Professor Rattigan from Disney's The Great Mouse Detective. In China, by contrast, these rodents are associated with wealth, prosperity and clever resourcefulness. Rats, especially the brown, black and Polynesian rats, live in our shadow, dwelling in our cities, gnawing on electrical wires, raiding food supplies, and causing millions of dollars worth of damage to infrastructure. However, this only represents the outcome of human expansion, with these adaptable and enterprising animals simply taking advantage of the world that we've created. Members of the genus Rattus have today spread to every continent except Antarctica, hitching a ride on human ships and trade caravans. Although this wasn't always the case, Rattus unsurprisingly belongs to the clade Rattini, which represents just one of the many highly diverse radiations within the rodent subfamily Murine. This group, which contains over 519 living species, first emerged in South Asia during the Middle Miocene roughly 14 million years ago. Some of the earliest known fossils have been recovered from the Siwalik Hills of Pakistan, including the genera Antimus and Potwamus. All murines are united by key anatomical features, including a distinctive molar pattern that involves 3 rows of cusps instead of 2. The clade Rattini represents one of the most basal groups of murines, having split off from the rest approximately 12 million years ago based on phylogenetic studies. They almost certainly originated in East and Southeast Asia, which remains the centre of their diversity today. Somewhat confusingly, the most basal modern members of Rattini seem to be the harvest mice of the genus Micromus, which just goes to show that the labels of rat and mouse are often applied in a very arbitrary way. There are 2 species of these cute little animals, with the Eurasian harvest mouse, Micromus minutus, being by far the most widespread, with a range stretching from Spain to southern China. Possessing reddish-brown fur, a prehensile tail and broad feet, these tiny animals are Europe's smallest rodents, weighing between 4 and 11 grams, or 0.14 and 0.39 ounces. This is approximately half the weight of the common house mouse. A skilled climber that dwells in a variety of habitat types, from marshland to hedgerows and areas of tall grassland, harvest mice feed on seeds, insects and fruit. Famous for building spherical nests out of woven grass stems, the genus Micromus first appeared during the late Miocene and was quite diverse, with there being at least 10 extinct species. Other basal members of Rattini include the largely insectivorous, currently unnamed clade, which are endemic to the island of Sulawesi in Indonesia. Some of these were only scientifically described quite recently, including the hog-nosed shrew rat, Hyorhinomys stuempkei. This unusual and highly specialised rodent possesses a bright pink prominent nose, large ears, and a small mouth relative to its body size. The incisors are highly elongated, with the animal also lacking a coronoid process on the dentary, which indicates a weak bite and a diet that does not require chewing. It's thought to feed mostly on worms and beetle larvae. Other members of this island clade include the edented Sulawesi rat, Porcidentamus vermidax, which lacks molar teeth altogether and possesses bicupsid upper incisors, completely unlike those of any other rodent. This is due to its highly specialised niche as a vermivore, feeding entirely on earthworms. Other groups within Rattini include the Niviventa clade, which is native to China, Southeast Asia, Indonesia and Malaysia, containing the type genus Niviventa itself, as well as many other species, including the so-called giant rats of the genus Hyorhinomys, which are semi-arboreal omnivores that can weigh up to 500 grams. Other, even larger members of Rattini include the Flores giant rat Papagomus armandvilii, unsurprisingly native to the Indonesian island of Flores. This huge rodent is about the size of a rabbit, weighing up to 2.5 kilograms or 5.5 pounds, apparently spending much of its time on the ground and taking refuge in burrows. The species is mostly herbivorous, feeding on leaves, fruit and buds. During the Pleistocene, it lived alongside the small human species Homo floresiensis, which probably hunted the rat for food. Other unusual insular forms include the Ryukyu long-tailed giant rat of the genus Diplothrix. This endangered species is only found on the central Ryukyu Islands of Japan, and possesses a somewhat spiny coat of greyish fur, a forest-dwelling animal that feeds on insects and seeds. Its population numbers have been heavily impacted by predation from feral dogs, cats and mongooses. These are close relatives of the bandicoot rats of South and Southeast Asia, with the Australian marsupial bandicoots being named after these animals and not the other way round. 3 species are present within the genus Bandicota, with the largest of these being the greater bandicoot rat B. indicus. Native to the Indian subcontinent, southern China and Southeast Asia, this shaggy-furred, relatively bulky rodent can weigh up to 1 kilogram or 2.2 pounds. Thriving in man-made environments like cities, villages and cultivated fields, these aggressive animals are not fussy eaters, feeding on grain, vegetables, human waste and garbage. Their smaller relative, the lesser bandicoot rat B. bengalensis, has a similar range and is considered a major pest to cereal crops across South Asia. Finally, we now come to the incredibly successful genus Rattus itself, which probably first appeared during the late Miocene roughly 7 million years ago, and underwent a period of significant diversification during the Pleistocene. The genus almost certainly evolved in East and Southeast Asia, which is where the oldest fossil remains have been identified. Before human interference, the 64 or so extant species of Rattus were mostly found in the Indian subcontinent, as well as East and Southeast Asia, with some also having successfully colonised Australia during the Pleistocene. As there are so many species, with there being little information about most of them, I'll be sticking to the 3 that have benefited the most from their relationship with humans, with these being the brown, black and Polynesian rats. I'll start with the latter. Also known as the Hyorhinomys, this animal was not, despite its common name, originally native to Polynesia, instead inhabiting the forests and grasslands of Southeast Asia, with molecular evidence suggesting that the species, formerly known as Rattus exulans, originated on the island of Flores. Slightly smaller than the brown and black rats, the Hyorhinomys possesses a dark brownish coat, large round ears and a long thin body. A highly adaptable nocturnal omnivore that feeds on fruit, seeds, insects, bird eggs and small vertebrates, Rattus exulans are adept climbers, often making their nests in trees. They can't swim over long distances, meaning that its extensive range in the Pacific was facilitated by hitching a ride with the Polynesian peoples as they sailed across the ocean from New Zealand to Hawaii. Able to thrive in a whole host of different ecosystems, from tropical Fijian forests to the cool temperate mountain slopes of New Zealand. In addition to being a major agricultural pest across Southeast Asia, these animals have proven to be a serious invasive species across the Pacific, with ground-dwelling invertebrates like giant wetters and small lizards suffering falling population numbers as a result of predation by the rodents. Hyorhinomys also show a predilection for consuming bird eggs, which had disastrous consequences once the rats were introduced to New Zealand, which is home to many species of flightless ground-nesting birds. These animals have also been implicated in the destruction of forest cover on Rapa Nui, also known as Easter Island. Thankfully, conservation efforts are now in place for the many species that were negatively impacted by the spread of the Hyorhinomys, although the rodents remain a significant invasive species, able to rapidly bounce back from attempts to eradicate them. Meanwhile, the infamous black rat, creatively named Rattus rattus, originated in the Indian subcontinent and diverged from the common ancestor of the larger brown rat during the early Pleistocene. With coat colours that range from jet black to light brown, our Rattus tend to measure between 5 and 7 inches long, not including the long tail, which adds another 6 to 8 inches to the animal's overall length. Weighing between 75 and 230 grams, or up to 8.1 ounces. Black rats have a noticeably more slender build than the brown rat, with comparatively large eyes, ears, and a more pointed snout. With a very broad diet and great climbing ability, these animals spread out of their South Asian homeland, accompanying human trade routes over both land and sea. They had reached the Mediterranean at least by the time of the Roman Empire, and later spread further across Europe, although declined there by the 6th century CE due to the collapse of the Roman grain trade, climatic cooling, and the effects of the Justinianic plague. By the Middle Ages, black rats had rebounded, and were traditionally vilified as the primary source of contagion for the Black Death, with the plague bacterium Yersinia pestis contained in the fleas carried on the rodents' bodies. However, more recent research has questioned this, with the plague originating in Asia and transmitted by multiple rodent species as well as humans, not solely the black rat. Preferring warmer climates, these animals were always more heavily concentrated in northern European port cities and not in the surrounding countryside, although thrived in more tropical regions. Hitching a ride aboard ships, these animals spread around the world during the period of European colonialism, and are now major pests, especially on island ecosystems. Ironically, however, populations of Rattus have declined dramatically in the UK, with black rats now being very rare in my home country. They're highly social animals, living in territorial groups consisting of multiple males and females, preferring dry, elevated places like attics, roofs and trees, while displaying considerable aggression to outsiders. Females can produce between 5 and 8 litters per year, each with 5 to 12 pups. In modern times, its range overlaps with that of the brown rat Rattus norvegicus, although this species originated in northern China and Mongolia during the early Pleistocene. These are larger and more heavily built animals than the black rat, generally weighing between 140 and 500 grams, or up to 17.6 ounces. The eyes and ears are comparatively small, while their tails are shorter than their bodies, in contrast to Rattus. True omnivores capable of eating almost anything, brown rats are highly adaptable, preferring colder climates than the black rat, while also being proficient swimmers, an ability famously put to use in human sewers. Rattus norvegicus spread out of Asia during the medieval period, eventually managing to displace the black rat in Europe due to its larger size, better cold tolerance, and being able to exploit the shift from wooden thatched structures to brick and mortar buildings. Living in territorial and hierarchical social groups, brown rats will regularly groom each other, engage in play behaviour, and will dig extensive burrows for shelter. This has allowed brown rats to thrive in human-modified environments, with those living in cold, desert or tropical ecosystems solely relying on our buildings and infrastructure to survive. It's been suggested that there may be as many as 100 million of these rodents residing in New York alone, although this may be an overestimate, with alleyways and garbage dumps providing them with ample access to leftover human food. This can even lead to individual rats developing preferences for certain types of cuisine, for example preferring pizza or Chinese takeout, despite often generating a sense of revulsion due to their association with urban blight. Brown rats have also been domesticated into pet fancy rats, which come in a variety of coat colours and are said to be intelligent, playful and sociable. Unfortunately, brown rats are also one of the worst invasive species, and have been implicated in a third of recorded bird, mammal and reptile extinctions. However, this is not the fault of the rodents themselves. They are simply responding to and exploiting the human-made environments they find themselves in. Similarly, both black and brown rats don't really deserve the evil reputation they've received, at least in Western societies. As they were not primarily responsible for the Black Death, they are neither aggressive or filthy, and they are intelligent and sociable. Where rats do provide a higher risk of disease in poverty-stricken urban areas with crumbling infrastructure, this is more a reflection of how poorly our societies care for the vulnerable and disadvantaged. In short, these highly adaptable animals hold up a mirror to humanity, one that captures us at our worst, such as our impact on the environment and propensity for territorial behaviour, and our best, being social, playful and intelligent. Thanks for watching, everyone. The next episode will be covering the so-called Cretaceous kraken Nanaimo haggati. See you again soon. Cheerio.